And there we go.
Yeah, little bit of back end magic.
Yeah, still tweaking our technical stuff, playing with the timer and countdown and things. And yeah, Geek Out number 39, Dune by Frank Herbert, one of my personal favorite sci-fis. We welcome once again Chaz from Books and Stuff with Chaz. Thanks for hanging with us.
Yeah, glad to be here. This is fun.
Yeah. And then, of course, as you can see in the tags, Carl, Peter over there. And yeah, for any of those that are new to these streams, spoiler warnings ahead. And yeah, let's get into it. We all have various degrees of Dune experience. If anybody's seen our other trailers, Peter first started Dune this last week. Chaz, you read Dune a while ago, right?
Yeah, I read it a while ago. And yeah, easily my favorite sci-fi book of all time.
Yeah. I
fantasy, depending on how you want to go.
I was about to say, like, it's sci-fi in the way that Star Wars is sci-fi. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Most definitely, yeah.
It's still sci-fi, but it's definitely not hard sci-fi. There's a bit of that hand waving, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. Chaz said one of his favorite sci-fis. It's definitely one of my top 5. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite. I'm going to put Peter on the spot. What's your impression of Dune now that you're melange cherry has been popped.
It is very unique because it's the kind of the typical prophecy child, but at the same time, it also like lays out the whole evil villain plan, and it's at the beginning instead of at the end. And the fact that their whole plan happens, but then at the same time it doesn't go the way they planned. It does the before chapter inserts that I love so much from Brandon Sanderson very well, and in a different light. They're relevant, but it's more just like overarching in full context about the universe as a whole kind of deal versus like I guess Mistborn Era 1. It's very like directly correlated to what's going on. So it's I don't know. It's a good series or a good first book. I'm excited to continue the series. You know what I mean?
Yes. Warning, Dune Messiah Book 2 is very crucial to the storyline, but in my personal opinion, probably my least favorite of all 8, including the 2 that the Son did to finish the series. But after you get through Messiah, it really starts to pick up. And like Dune is so inspirational and influential on the genre altogether. But for me personally, very few people have Frank Herbert's writing style, like this omnipresent. They pretty much tell you what's going to happen in the beginning, right? Which is different. I don't know about you guys. Chaz, have you read a lot of books that kind of take that same tone, or?
I haven't really. He definitely has a unique writing style.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've heard, his son and the other, and I think it was Kevin Anderson that they kind of co-author them all, or a few of them anyway. I don't think from what I've heard, they haven't been able to measure up to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciated that the storyline continued, but from what I remember, and it's been a while since I did books 7 and 8, it's a very different tone than Frank Herbert. Like the storyline continues. But yeah, like I remember the first time I read Dune, it was hard for me to get into it. I think I had to put it down and come back to it. And then I got hooked. But like pretty much from the get-go, they tell you what's going to happen, right? Like we get introduced to the father, Leto, and we know the doctor's going to kill him, and we know how, and it's like it's just kind of it's different. I'm used to, let's kind of hint and foreshadow, and maybe lead you a little bit stronger than others, and not just give it all away, right?
But then it also does well with the whole Paul, our main character, how due to the spice and being on the planet, he's able to access his powers and he's able to see in the future. But we have a lot of those like weird lucid moments where he's not sure if he's seeing a potential future or if it's already happened or if this is, the current or the now. And that's, kind of a unique power. And it just, for as much as is set in stone, the fact that he understands the spice and everything makes it work out in the end. And because he can see the future and he knows all the other, I'm going to butcher the name, Bene Gesserits or whatever, for their hidden powers and whatnot, I also see that this is a spot that's, black or standing on a knife edge where it could go either way. And
yeah. My first read was so long ago, so again, I'm going to throw you on the spot, Pete, but I've heard from other people, even though like they give it all away, it's still really hard for them to track what's where, especially since we do some of the time dilation and whatnot. Like, was that your experience or?
Yeah, that was my experience, but it was more so that it takes me a while to really get characters' names down. And so we met all of our main characters within the first couple chapters, and we
Right.
got the whole like rundown of the story, kind of moral compass. Hey, he came from this, slave world, and now he's, part of the elite, but at the same time, he plays his musical instrument, and then we have that whole, knife fighting training beforehand where he's, serious about training him, but at the same time, he's able to put it into context and has that whole, what's the quote? Something about this whole mood thing where they start dueling, and he's like, "Oh, I guess I'm just not in the mood." And he's like, "That has nothing to do with it."
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's it's very unique throughout it.
There are a lot of like we talk about it a lot, like different lessons and things to pull from the books, and this is probably one of my top books for like lessons to pull from. Are there anything that come to mind for you guys, Chaz? Like there's just so many good quotes, right? Like the Bene Gesserit, fear is the mind killer line there.
Yeah, the litany on the fear is really good. That's probably the most clear-cut lesson in the book that most people come away with is allowing your fear to pass over you and not let it to drive who you are and what you do, and that's right out of Eastern mysticism, and I love it because I'm an Eastern philosophy geek. So
yeah.
So that's right out of that page book, and I'm like, okay, I like it.
I'll go through every so often and catch myself like doing the litany against fear and kind of like channeling that, like, take control of your emotions, the situation, and handle this. Rajathon, definitely, if you guys haven't already, go check his channel out. Really cool guy. Wants to know if we have a favorite side character. Anybody? Pete, you want to jump on this first?
So I'd have to go with Gurney as well because he plays a big role in the very beginning for, training him. And then he is very inspirational for when he goes and lives with the, starts with an F.
Fremen.
When he goes and he lives with the Fremen, and even he's talks highly of him, and then for the moment where he's about to slay his mother, Paul's mother, and Jessica, and just like the honor and the whole fact that once it's laid out, he thought he was doing what's right, and it actually turns out that wasn't right. And then we get that whole like moral value lesson again where Jessica is pretty much like, why must everybody ask me to kill my friends or something? And
yeah, all the feels. I really have to narrow my scope down to the first book because the first couple that come to mind for me are later on, and the reasons why. But Gurney is definitely a lot of fun. I'm with Rajathon. Stilgar is also really cool in his own way, and I really like the kind of the Fremen attitude on things. Did you pick one, Chaz?
Yeah, I definitely like Gurney a lot. I also kind of really have a fondness for Thufir Hawat. Even though, with everything that he got put through after the Harkonnens kind of usurped everything, and he just, he still just kept his loyalty to House Atreides, and really tried to do everything that he could to to, even though he was kind of forced into the house of Harkonnen. It was just, I don't know. I really like him. I like the Mentats in general. They're really cool. So
it's a really interesting faction, right?
it,
And to kind of put it a little bit in perspective for those who haven't watched it, which or read it, if you haven't, definitely worth reading. But it's kind of in a post-apocalyptic era, right? Like we get a little bit of the lore talking about how like machines kind of took over. So the Mentats are like living computers, right? Like their job is to take in data and to run calculations or whatnot. So I really find that whole faction really interesting.
Okay, that was one of the things that I was confused about throughout it because it felt like it was just hinted at. Because in the
Mhm.
beginning, they talk about, oh, when he's got his hand in the box and he's going through the
Ganjubar.
Ganju bar training stuff, and she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you're a human," and it's like, okay, are we talking like dwarf, elf, dragon, not human, or whatnot? And then they mention, oh, the quote of "shall not recreate a mind as a man," and she's
Yes.
like, "Nope, it should be said not recreate it as a human."
Yes.
And yeah, and I
Yeah.
was a little confused. I felt like it was like kind of computer, but not computer. But then it also seemed like it was hypnotizing or other conditioning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's another one of like my favorite quotes where she talks about how an animal will gnaw on its leg to escape, but a
Mhm.
human will lay there and wait for the protection of the greater species and whatnot. Like there's just so many good quotes that like you stop and you think you're like, like yeah, like that's how it should be, and as you go and you interact, it's like, are they relying on their animal instinct or are they thinking like a human, right? And I even find myself in the day-to-day life, acting like I'm in the Dune realm. I'm like, are you human?
Right.
um
I got another good one,
Go
but
for it.
I actually found this one, so we'll be pressing a couple buttons.
All right, show us that tech magic there, Pete.
Read, think you of the fact that a deaf person cannot hear? Then what deafness may we not all possess? What senses do we lack that we cannot see and cannot hear another world all around us? What is there around us that we cannot stop it?
That
The Yeah, that came through. The audiobook performance on this is amazing. I,
It's
I lost, yeah, I lost track, but it's got multiple voice actors and really cool. Um, to bring it back for Rajathon, I'm going to go with Jessica on one of my favorite side characters because the introduction to the Bene Gesserit is super interesting, and Chapter House of Dune is one of my favorites out of the series where we get to spend a little bit more time with them there. Um, no spoilers on that though. So yeah, like we get introduced, we get all these like awesome characters thrown at us, and then I'm trying to think how far in the book it's relatively quick that they start killing people off, right? Like the betrayal happens.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, and then we get introduced to the Fremen there, um, and it's just so much good stuff. I don't even know which direction you guys want to go in talking about this awesome book because, as I said in chat earlier, it's probably one of my most frequent reread series out there, and there's just so much good stuff. What do you guys think, Chaz? What are some of your favorite moments from the book?
Oh, it's so hard to really pinpoint, but one of my favorite scenes of all time is definitely uh, the the testing done by Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mahayam, right?
In
Yeah,
the beginning.
that scene is always just it's a painful one. I very much felt it. He has a way of drawing you into the character's experience in the book, and
Yeah.
so you really kind of feel Paul's pain when his hand is in the box, and you know.
Yeah, again, it's that his writing style just kind of like throws you into the characters so well. And we just did the Dune reaction trailer last night. I know you've watched it and seen it, and they include that scene, right?
Well,
In the
that's one
Dune
of the
trailer.
that's going to be one of the weird ones. Like, I felt like the book probably is going to do it better justice because it kind of talks about like the sensation building up and then coming to a climax and all of that, where it's kind of hard to portray that visually without an additional narrator or whatnot. But at the same time, it will still do it justice for the whole scene.
Right.
Yeah. It's a powerful scene though. And I agree with you. I haven't watched the older, I think it's like 1984 Dune film, and I think they tried to do a blend of that. I know we were talking off air. You've seen it, right, Chaz?
I have, yeah. It's actually one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time, too. I've probably watched
Okay.
it 10 or 12 times. I first
Okay.
saw it when I was really young, and it, yeah, it's a great movie. And from what I saw the trailer, and thinking back, I almost think that perhaps, I guess I'll have to wait until the movie comes out, but I think perhaps they did that a little bit better in the original,
Okay.
because uh, one of the hallmarks of Frank's book is he's got a lot of internal monologue for the characters, and they really tried to bring that out in the film, whereas I don't know if they're going to do a whole lot of the internal monologue in the new movie.
Yeah.
You hear in the scene where his hand is in the box, he's got a lot of, you can hear his thoughts that he's
hmm
thinking to himself as his hand is in the box, and it makes it so much more real. And Raja, yeah, you're right, they do change quite a bit in the movie, but surprisingly not as much as you think. It still did a lot of stuff really well. I read the book for the first time after having seen the movie several times.
Okay.
So
So
when
you
I
came in through the movie.
I'm like, okay, well they didn't they didn't terribly butcher the book in terms of an adaptation, but they did change quite a bit.
It's something that I had to kind of check myself many years ago and take a step back and accept the fact that they're different mediums, right?
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
so much more you can do in one medium or another, just because, right? Like the internal dialogue, so on and so forth. Though it sounds like they did an all right job with the '84 um, adaptation, but it's different,
Mm.
and the time constraints are different. And I'm excited that they're not going to try to cram everything into just one movie this time around, that they're going to split it. I haven't been following it as closely, so I'm not sure where exactly they're going to split it up, but it makes a lot of sense because it just gives you that much extra time.
Mhm.
And yeah, from what I saw from the trailer, I'm pretty excited about the new film, and we're supposed to get that before the end of the year.
Mhm.
And a lot of big actors in there too.
Yeah,
So,
there really are. Yeah, and I think from what I've heard, they may. I don't really know exactly where they're going to split it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they split it right where Paul takes the water of life, and then they
okay.
where he drinks the bile, and then they
Mm,
just do that on a cliffhanger, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Pull a what was that, like Game
I
of
know.
Thrones season 6?
Till the next movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember what all was included in the trailer, but I would have thought it would have been right after the Duke dies and they're trying to escape and they've been poisoned. They're on the cart and they're like, oh, hey, just stab him a couple times, leave him out for the worms outside the shield. Because the scene I remember is when we finally get to see the worm and the maker. And in my mind, that's where they cross the wide open expanse and they set up the thumper behind them. And then they got to do the funky walk, shuffle thing, slide to sound as if you're part of the dunes. And then I feel like that could have been it, because it could be the whole like build up and suspense and get you introduced to all the different factions for the guild and the empire, and our different houses and the economics of the spice and how it's stimulating these powers, and get hints into that, and then the big climax of it all going downhill, and then end it with he's escaping. But I can't remember if that's like the last scene that I saw on it. But
It's hard to know based off the trailer, though, right? Because it's just
there was just so many scenes, and it was pretty rapid fire.
They were really putting a lot of piecemeal together with the trailer. Taking, different scenes throughout the movie and just kind of mashing them together. It's hard to know. Yeah.
So I guess there is a lot that happens before the betrayal, because you have, the move, the guild liner, the introduction to the Fremen, the Harkonnens kind of betrayal, the Hunter Seeker, and then just like all the lore behind the Bene Gesserit. And yeah, this was I'm trying to think, like one of the first books I read where religion played such a heavy role in it. Like typically most books, though I guess Hyperion comes to mind, which is another good one that kind of has a bit of religion in there. So maybe it was part of the time of sci-fi, but yeah, like just so heavy with like the Orange Catholic Bible, and then all the Bene Gesserit legends that they've planted. And then, yeah.
I guess Mistborn also has it, but that's not like a, hey, everybody follow this. That's like a, you could be more, you could be less. All these things are separate. Just kidding. They're all one. Yeah. Besides the point, not talking about that book. No.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Sorry, backing up a step. Probably my favorite scene is when Paul's sister is talking about or talking to the Bene Gesserit woman who used the ganja bar for the box thing in the beginning, and she's just like, nope, I don't listen to the Emperor.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, she'll tell you, and she's like, oh, kill her, and she's like, no, that's not how it happened at all. This is how it happened. Just totally jumps in her mind and imparts the whole scene of how she came to be. And in that scene, it's probably one of my favorites, because throughout life, I have found people who you can just tell or feel they have an old soul, or you can just tell or feel they have a young soul. Like, not necessarily like all life experience and lessons and blah, but just the way they handle themselves. And yeah, it felt very much like a young soul, old soul kind of moment for me.
Yeah. She's such an interesting character too. And I'm trying to think, like, again, this book was like early in the sci-fi realm, yet it's just so unique in its own way, right? Like pretty much an adult born in a child's body because of the spice essence. And
and the way that it's kind of like a paradox of itself, because you should not create a robot of a human mind, and yet we're literally downloading each other's consciousness and whole backstories into other people through a spice that distorts reality and time and space, and through taking this poison of which is supposed to kill us, that puts our body into limbo, that then we have to play God and change the molecules so that we can speak to these other entities and download the whole human consciousness of being it's not Bene Gesserit, it's whatever the Fremen term is, of these people. So it's kind of one of those weird forward back paradoxes for me, because
Was it the Sayadina?
Sayadina.
Yeah.
Well, that's a reoccurring theme with the Atreides too, right? Like there are all these, lack of a better word, like policies and taboo things in the culture, yet the Atreides continue to kind of like break those, right? Jessica broke rank and gave her Duke a son who didn't turn out to be the Quizar Slatterock. He was something else.
But wasn't he? No, he is, because that's the whole scene with the water, where he takes the water, and I remember the end scene when he's talking to the person who administrated the box thing, and he pretty much says like, look into that space that you cannot see, and I'll be staring back out from there.
Yes. So that's all true. And I don't want to do spoilers, but he also says that he's something different and a generation early. So continue the series.
Okay.
He has a lot of the same, he can do a lot of the same things.
And I guess I feel it's kind of like that paradox of forwards and backwards at the same time, where don't make an AI or a robot in a human mind. And if we know that a male can access the other side of the power and can fully utilize it, someone had to have done it before. So they probably went all like rage mode and killed each other off or whatever. And that's why we only have the female half. And that's why they're so hesitant to make the male half. And then, there can be more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing with this book too. Even though we get so much lore that is expanded on in the future books, this book, and I think that was his original plan. I don't think he originally planned to write more than one book in this universe, but then they had in that golden paycheck, and
it helps.
It helps. But you can tell by the end of the book that it could have easily been a standalone novel.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I think a lot of people, I can't remember if Peter said this on air or not, but when he talks to them about Dune, they're like, oh, it's a great book. And he's like, oh, it's a series, right? Because it is such a good standalone, that people don't realize that it is this epic 6 or 8, if you include the kids' book, series. And
I don't know, maybe it's because I already knew there were more, but when I got to the end, it was kind of like, okay, yes, you're the prophesized child, yes, you fulfilled your goal, yes, you saved the Fremen and molded into their religious views and became all of this. But the thing that stood out for me is those beginning chapter excerpts were all from brain fart, the word for the mouse that we call our main guy, Paul.
Muad'Dib.
Anyway, but then it changes. The last couple chapters change to a different name. And in my mind, that is Paul's sister, what she will become and where she fits in the lore of the religion. So for me, I felt like, okay, this is his way of saying like, he wrapped it up nicely. Don't get me wrong. Like, from having your whole family and tribe and everyone, the Duke slayed, to all the different factions breathing down your neck and everything else, and just the way that he high hands the guild, and like it has a satisfying conclusion, but it also just hinted at there's so much more to come. Like, I still felt like we barely knew any of the Bene Gesserit's power. They hint at the truth. They hint at the future sight. They do all that, but now we've got access to the male side of it, and we get a little snippet right after he changes the water of life, where he's like, "Oh, you have to." The female side is like, "You have to, give up or give yourself or whatnot," where the male side, you can't. You have to take to give and give to take, or some other loop going on there. So I don't know, I like the development of the magic system, so to speak. And this is a weird one where you have the potential, you have to be trained to how to utilize your body to better understand and to better execute, but you still need a catalyst. You still need the spice. You still need some other peyote or whatever to heighten your senses to be able to, see the slight hesitation in other people. And then it was the weird sense of the truth that they see is only based off of the individual. So kind of like a lie test, where like, if you believe that is how it is, then you are telling the truth because it's what you believe, because of your heart rate, because of your pulse and everything else. But I don't know, it just felt like there needed to be more. It was a nice conclusion. I was happy. I was satisfied with it. But at the same time, yeah.
Come on, Pete. You always want more when it comes to these epic series.
Comes to the whole, what is it? Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be converted. So the fact that series or books end is just like, hey, I just stopped writing about it. And I'm going to remember the name once upon a time, but in the anime realm, they have a main story, and that's canon. And then they have in the same realm, but by a different author, someone who's like, hey, I like what you built here. I'm going to come play in the space. I forget the word. Anyway, I think more people should do that. And we see a lot of it with like Star Wars because it's such a big name, because people like it. But you just run into the whole legal drama of copyrights and this is mine. And it's like, no, this is mine. And, it's just nice to skip the first two books where it's all world building and just jump in and blow stuff up. So
I thought you liked the world building.
I do, but I'm having a hard time not continuing the story and waiting until next month to when we get on to book 2.
Yeah. Well, we have some other books to binge in between now and then. But to bring it back to book 1 of the Dune Chronicles, again, there's just like so many good, interesting nuggets, and you touched on a number of different things. And again, like it transfers to real life too, where like you're talking about how like with the Bene Gesserit and observing others and everything, there was like that point when like Jessica and Thupir Howard were kind of like facing off, and she was calling him out, and she was leading him, and she's like, oh, like I kind of need to shock him to get him out of his train of thought. And again, like so often you see that in real life where we all get tunnel vision, and then you need somebody to kind of like throw in a new piece of data and be like, oh yeah, like let me look at this a little bit differently. And we talk about it all the time with books, but they teach us empathy, give us new perspective on things, and teach us like, hey, sometimes we just need to stop, pause, and challenge our own perspective. And if this book doesn't do that for you, I don't know what you've been reading, but it's just like all over the place on some of these concepts.
Right.
And then I wish I looked up the article, but like the idea of ancestral memories that we talked about, where like the Bene Gesserit can only look into the female half, but Paul can look into also the male half. There was an article I read more recently that was pretty much talking about like there's research showing that to a certain degree we have that, right? Like we can't tap into it the way they can in the book. But you know, like as in here, and what's that famous video game that's really popular? It's Assassin's Creed. Don't they do something similar like that? Have you played it, Chaz, or familiar with it?
Played it a little bit, yeah. Yeah, I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's this it's this technology. It's almost like a virtual reality technology.
Okay.
The main character gets wired into this box, and he can relive the past memories of his ancestors.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before I forget, one of the things that I also really enjoyed about this is, yes, this is the prophet child, but people are real with him. People are his friend. People keep him in line. As we were talking with Gurney, like he sets him straight about this whole mood thing during fighting. And then the same thing with how as after they crossed a long pass in the desert, Jessica ends up besting the leader of the little tribe thingy. What's that guy's name?
Stilgar.
Stilgar. Okay. And then
With her
when
weirding way.
yes, when Paul is about to ride the Maker for the first time and Stilgar ends up, putting his, nose to the grindstone, so to speak, and he's like, hey, you didn't have an out. You didn't have a way to retreat. You still need to do this. And it's just the whole sense of like, even if you are the best and numero uno and number one, like you didn't get there alone. There are other perspectives and there are others who keep you in line and who, say something to you to encourage or to, constructive criticism. And this is one of the things that I run into so much at my current work where I'll say something to someone, I'll be like, oh, hey, you didn't do this thing over there. And they just like lose it. They're like, why are you attacking me? I know what I'm doing. Get out of my face. And I'm just like, I'm just trying to look out for you. I saw you didn't do it. I could have done it for you, but that wouldn't have helped anybody. I know I wasn't, saying you suck at life, go die in a hole or anything. I was just saying, hey, trying to help you out here. And it's just, yeah. Anyway, one of those life lessons.
There's just so many in this book, and we could fill the whole stream with it. Rajathan talks about like, I am a friend of Jameis too, like with the Fremen all together. Just it's a great reminder of just like different perspectives of people and cultures too. And even though Paul killed Jameis, just the Fremen's overall attitude where like they won't even let him yield, right? Like it has to be to the death, but afterwards it's still he was a friend, right? And Jessica steps up and it's like, when he sensed that we needed to see the truth of the situation, he challenged him, and it's just like yeah.
He took his water, but he ultimately still honored him, even though he honored him for what he stood for and everything.
Yeah. I think the world could use a little bit more of that. Like, even though we conflict, even though we disagree, we could still honor each other and respect each other at the end and take each other's water for our own, for the sake of the tribe, right?
Right.
So, yeah. Go ahead, Pete.
Another thing that was just like glanced over or like touched on that we didn't really, there has to be more books. This is how I knew, because on one side, they're just known as the worms that come and destroy stuff. And then on the Frenum, it's the maker. And I get it. It's, possible lost in translation, different language, blah, 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 blah. But the
makers
maker,
are the babies. And if somebody else...
No, because doesn't he say to ride the maker? Because when this is old,
I guess
man,
you're right.
of
I think
the
it's the
desert,
little makers. Yeah, you're right.
They're all makers, and it has to do with the correlation between the spice, which he ends up figuring out, and through all the subtle hints. And then they do have the baby makers that are not baby makers, the makers of the Anyway, so that's one of those, like, there's so much more there, and we need to figure out the symbiotic, I think that's the word, where they both thrive off of each other to succeed.
Yeah.
And then, like, sorry, separate parallel was the whole, like, greenhouse gases, global warming is real. I'm sorry, but it's true. And in this book, they go the opposite way, where, it's essentially as if it's apocalyptic. Like, they're struggling to survive. They're struggling to have enough water. It's a different custom, different, setting. And the whole, like, I guess, drive for them to succeed through their religious lore is to make a oasis, or to make the grasslands, and to keep a little bit of the desert to do the spice, but then to make the rest of it habitable, that no one will need for it, no one will want for it. And it's just kind of the whole paradox of 2020 right now, where all the factories are shut down and we stop polluting, and all these other great things are happening.
Oh, you're talking about, like, them seeing, like, dolphins or whatever in Italy for the first time, and, like, wildlife kind of coming back or whatever.
Sure. I didn't know anything about that. I was just talking less pollution, but yeah, it's just one of those unique or frame of references or viewpoints for trying to better the planet. That was encouraging.
Right. Yeah. They're very intent on protecting the habitats of Shai-Hulud and the makers. Not only because, and my understanding was they call them the makers partly because they're the reason the spice exists, is they created it as part of their communion with the desert. But just protecting that habitat because that's their natural habitat, and treating the spice as a gift from the maker, and a way for humans to be in communion with the maker. And that lore right there is just really, really interesting. And then, of course, the babies are the ones that they take the bile from to create the water of life.
Oh, I forget the word for it, but it's essentially the Frenum's ecological survey guy.
Leto? No.
Yeah,
Leah.
it starts with the L.
Kinds.
And we get the whole, like, his scene where he's dying, and he recognizes that the spice below him has been interacted by the maker, and enough saliva has dealt with it, and now there's a CO2 bubble or whatever coming out of it. And kind of like at the beginning, when I want to say Jessica talks about, like, oh, there's so much potential for stuff to happen, or for us to get water. Where's the ecological balance or kinds? He wasn't the Frenum one, though.
He had multiple names.
Oh, okay, that's probably what messed me up.
Yeah, because he had his, like, Fremen name, and then he had
like Paul does
his imperial name and title. So
and I thought that was pretty unique, with the whole, like, as I'm dying, I'm hearing the words of my father. Weird thing, but yeah. So.
Getting the lecture.
Oh yeah. I kind of had the wiki up too, just to kind of help out a little bit, and or the fan wiki, I should say, and yeah, Pardo Kynes, I guess, was his other name.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was kind of sad he ends up dying because of, or with the timing. Would have been great to go all Captain Planet and with our powers combined. Well, that's okay.
There's not the main character immunity in this book, which again, I've talked about like a lot of respect for. We get introduced to a lot of characters that seem part of the main crew and they get killed off. At the end of the book, Paul's son even gets killed, right?
Yeah.
And just that whole interaction there, like the journey of him becoming the Fremen and changing the way of things, like even though Stilgard is his friend, he thinks that he's going to call him out and challenge him for leadership of the tribe. And,
then he just turns it on everyone and he's like, who is the leader? Am I the leader? Oh, my wife also commands here and my mother commands here. And who is the leader? And does that whole like, oh, but it is the way. Just kidding. We need to do this other stuff.
Yeah. It's something that I really came to hate. Working in management, I was like, oh, this is just how we've always done it. It's like that doesn't mean it's the right way, right? And he kind of does the same thing where he flips that on his head. It's like, why are we going to weaken ourselves here? So what if it's been the way?
I have the opposite paradox where it's Kaizen. It's a Japanese word for continual progression or like continual advancement. I probably butchered it, but essentially you submit a Kaizen to, hey, we've done it this way. I believe it can be done better. Here's my justification, my reasoning, blah, 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 which sounds great in theory. There is a method. There's a chance to change it and to better it. But in reality, it typically comes from someone messing up and then someone needing to justify it and do paperwork. So they say, hey, here's my Kaizen that I submitted to make sure this never happens again. And then it's like, oh, good, you did some paperwork. Higher ups say you're doing everything right. You did your job. And then we get, 3 months down the line after doing it, and they're like, well, why isn't this working? It's like, because you never look back on it. You just filled out your paperwork.
Bring it back, Pete. Bring it back, Pete.
Anyway.
You don't go back to work until tomorrow. Dune. Yeah.
Weirding way.
Yes. I remember you talking a bit about that also with the movie, how they changed it a little bit, right?
Yeah. At least in the Dune miniseries that they did on the Sci-Fi Network did it much truer to the book, I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, the weirding way is pretty interesting, right? Because it's kind of like this. It's like a martial art, really, in a lot of ways. It's kind of that form of movement to bypass other movements. Kind of like a counter movement to your opponent. I didn't get a really good grasp on it from the book, but it's
from what I remember, they kind of use it as, like you said, a catch-all for the martial arts that is taught through the Bene Gesserit, right? And the Fremen name it the Weirding Way. And again, like just that whole master yourself, master your body, practice the hand exercises where you try to just move like one section or one finger at a time without moving all the other ones to get the ultimate control between, mind and body and everything. And that was kind of Paul's trump card.
Right.
When he was fighting with Jamie, they all thought that he was a Viper and playing with him. But one, he was just a superior fighter. And two, he hadn't killed anybody before and he didn't want to kill him. So But yeah, and ended up saving Jessica, where, like, again, just the Fremen's whole paradigm is so interesting because, like, they waste nothing, they save all the water, but they almost got rid of Jessica because they thought she was dead weight in the beginning, right? Um, but because she mastered the weirding way, that's the connection thought there, and taught the Fremen, where the Fremen have pretty much been forged in this harsh environment to where they could take out the Sarkar, the Emperor's elite troops, before they mastered the weirding way, right? And we don't see it in this book, and I don't want to do spoilers, but it all comes down to that jihad that Paul's trying to avoid, right? Because there's like multiple paths in the future, and he's pretty much trained them to be this elite fighting force. And then, yeah, he sets the trap.
That sounds like a nice dream. I'm sorry. Back to Mistborn, book 2, like they figure you could be a nice guy and have good morals and values and set it all up, but in reality, you just got to rule with an iron fist, and you got to be like, because I said so, and then have the army stomp them because they didn't listen. Like, I don't know. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but he already did it at the end. He already flexed on everyone. He's like, you admit that I have control because I can destroy everything you know and love.
Yes.
Just kidding. It's all about money.
It's not just about money. It's about the dependence on the spice for their life, right?
And to be able to truth say and be able to do all the other stuff. And I think it will eventually come to it, because it's going to be as simple as like, oh, well, if he's the only one who can destroy it, well, if we, much like a maker, if we chop off a section, the other sections are still alive. So they'll just, take control of it or try to get it back. And
yeah. Rajasthan brought up a good revelation that the first time I read it was kind of like a WTF moment.
Right.
The fact that the bloodlines were mixed, where they allude to it being like several generations of Harkonnens versus Atreides. And then as Paul's like leaping ahead of his mother in kind of like seeing possibilities and connecting the dots, he kind of shocks her with, look at my face, mama. We are Harkonnen. What?
Yeah, that came out of left field.
What?
That was one of those things that I felt like was kind of glimpsed over, that didn't really solidify for me, because I remember, with the Ganja Bar, Bene Gesserit box lady conversation, they were talking about how the mother didn't know her parentage or her heritage, but not everybody does. And maybe we wanted to breed her with this for selective traits and this, that, and the other. And I didn't really care for the mentality, so maybe that's why I just like glanced over it and it didn't matter to me. And then when you had the Fremen or whatever, and they were essentially an amalgamation of all the different people, it was pretty much saying like, hey, if you can know our way and if you can be us, we welcome all, kind of deal. So I guess it didn't really stand out as much, but I probably just overlooked it.
I got a good laugh when his sister, called him granddad and took him out, right, with the ganja bar, the little needle.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Being a good little Fremen child and finishing off the injured and the dying. Yeah, Baron Harkonnen is Paul and her granddad, Aaliyah. And again, like, so much about the Fremen is so alien but makes so much sense, right? Like they're very practical people.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was interesting too.
Yeah. This book is just so.
Ships.
Oh, sorry. Say that again, Chaz.
So many interconnected relationships that you wouldn't have thought of when you first start out.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's so well written, yet the complexity of the story, um, definitely worth rereading to catch all the little nuances. And then I've reread it so many times, like it's a lot easier to connect some of the dots, but um, the forethought from the Bene Gesserit, their extensive breeding program, the Fremen, the politics with the houses, the mentats, just like all of it. It's there's a reason why it's one of our favorites, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So we typically talk about like MVPs for the books, but this is very much Paul's book. Who do you guys feel was like MVP or like one of the major influences for him that just really helped him make all this happen? I know he had a lot of teachers, a lot of trainers. Um, there are just so many key players for him to help get him to where he needed to be.
Right. He obviously has a strong relationship with Duncan, Idaho. That's
Yes.
that's a big one right there. And even though Gurney was kind of his trainer and everything like that, I think it's probably more so Duncan, Idaho is the kind of warrior that Paul aspired to be since they were so close.
Yes. Yes.
So I see him as a big player, even though he, unfortunately.
He is one of like the best lieutenants for the Atreides, right? Like he talks about he killed like 200, 300 men on Grommen or something like that.
Mhm.
And a very elite fighter. So in that sense, I'm kind of excited about Jason Momoa, Khal Drogo being our Duncan, Idaho, even though, as I said, not how I envision Duncan, but um, yeah, that could be very fun to see that on screen. Who jumps to mind for you, Pete?
So it all really depends on like which part of development you're talking about. Because I would say like his father, the Duke, for initially instilling the people's values, which has him or helps him succeed with the Frenem. But then as we get the scene in the end with Gurney, where he's pretty much talking about, hey, taking out people, this and that, and Gurney's like kind of, I guess, checking him where he's like, hey, your father would have cared more for the human life versus this other stuff. And it's that fine line between, that's who I used to be. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to preserve life and have more going on. But due to the situation, I've got to be heavy handed with it. And then his mother does a lot for the training, which helps him keep his cool, except for that one little time where we realize he is human and he drops the pack as they're trying to escape. And then he does that weird like alkaline battery spice water foam thingy.
It's hard to remember, but he was still like 15 at the time, right? Like he holds himself to a high standard, but he was still such a kid. He yeah, I'm with you there. I wish we spent more time with his father.
Yeah.
Like he seems like such a solid leader, and you could pull so much inspiration from him, right? Like we really just get the helicopter scene with him.
He was the Ned Stark.
He was the Ned Stark. Yes.
The whole time I was listening to it, I was like,
yes.
he was there as, this kingdom was founded. He was setting up to be the executor to, keep the rest of the world pure. And then, through the faints of the faints of the faints. Yeah.
That is probably one of the most accurate comparisons you could make right there. And I didn't make that connection, but yes, he is the Ned Stark of the Dune Chronicles.
Right.
Loyal, overall great guy. I'm going to swing the sword with my hand if I deal the punishment. People before things. Just yes. Good stuff. Good stuff.
And then another weird thing, they kept hinting that Paul was more like his grandfather than he was like his father. And since, the whole basis of the powers is being able to see the future and being able to see the past. And then I'm curious if we get a backstory for the grandfather, because a lot of people towards the end kind of hint that he looks more like his grandfather than his father.
Right. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm curious to know more about that too, and maybe Raja mentioned that they're going to be doing some new books about Duke Leto and stuff. Maybe they'll talk more about his father and those too. But yeah, I since I haven't read the other books, I don't know if they go more into the history of his grandfather and those two. I'm kind of guessing they probably do.
Yeah, it was just one of those weird things. Like, we know a lot of the big influences that kind of developed him into who he became, but then the only hint towards his grandfather is more like physical for how he looks.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
pretty unique dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, that one thing that I thought was really good, and in terms of maybe another MVP, is Chani, because I mean she really grounds Paul in a lot of ways, but because of their love for each other, and she was the focus of several of his dreams. And then finally meeting her, and it's kind of like solidifying that blending of the cultures between him and Chani.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Is that his wife, not wife?
History will count her as a wife, but she is his
concubine.
Thank you. I was drawing a blank.
That's something that I hope they keep, but I know they probably will finagle it somehow, because it's not a well accepted viewpoint in today's society to have,
Yeah. Oh, you mean in the movie?
Yeah, for the movie adaptation, it might be like a marriage divorce type thing, but it's probably not going to be like, this is my mistress and this is my wife.
Too much of the story. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. Come on, like.
Yeah, I disagree too. I think they'll keep that. That part was actually in the original movie too, and that was back in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
So we've come a long way since then. I think they'll keep it, because it is really important to the story that culture is very accepting of that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
The culture of Dune and everything. So I don't think they'll keep that away or take that away.
I got a kick out of the fact that like there's so many similarities between Jessica and Chani, and yet Jessica was so against Chani from the beginning, right? Like didn't want Paul to be involved with her, like when she starts to see things happening and realizing the connections between his vision back before the testing and everything else, like, oh, I gotta warn him, oh, I gotta let him know that like one of these Fremen women would not be appropriate wife for a duke's son or for a duke, et cetera, et cetera. Then she's like, wait a minute, I was a concubine, right? Like I never married the duke.
Yeah, I felt it was a very like she was stuck in the way that it should be, and if he is going to claim his rightful place in the as a duke, he should still have that open, and that's why she did it. But then, throughout Paul's whole thing, he ends up changing a lot for the greater good as a whole, and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Because if he was to ever, if Leto was to ever marry, he couldn't marry a Bene Gesserit. He would have to marry a political figure, and then that's what Paul ends up doing, actually marrying the Princess Irulan, and then Chani is his concubine still. Yeah.
Oh, Jameis's wife. Yeah, she's another one that kind of grew on me. And the scene that comes to mind is when Aaliyah, like she pretty much advocates for Aaliyah and defends Aaliyah, even though Paul takes her as servant instead of wife. But yeah, the selective breeding is a huge part of the Bene Gesserit plan and the storyline moving forward. And then just everything kind of gets flipped on its head, right? I touched a little bit on this earlier, but like the Bene Gesserit are taught to obey and follow their training, and Jessica broke rank, right? She gave him a son.
Yeah, we live to serve her.
Yeah, and they specialize in politics. And they basically do this selective breeding, like tracking the genes and everything to try to get the ultimate people, or for whatever traits, over hundreds of generations. But the emperor has these Bene Gesserit wives, and pretty much they followed their teaching and refused to give him a son. So he never had an heir. So like the Atreides here continue to like break with standard convention and end up being the ones that come out on top in the end, where Paul marries one of the emperor's daughter. So he goes from just a little old duke to Emperor Paul Muad'Dib,
right?
Also known as Usul in Sietch.
Right.
So yeah.
The inbreeding is a very interesting topic. I'm looking forward to reading more about. If there's more about that in the next books, I'm down.
Yeah, you gonna add Messiah to your you don't do TBRs.
No, I have a yearly TBR that I've got a list of all the books I want to read for the year, but I may have to trade one of those out.
Yeah, work Messiah in.
Yeah, I may have to work Messiah in.
I keep having to bite my tongue. Usually Peter's right there with me, but he's only gotten through book one.
I haven't read anything extra. It's all speculation.
Yeah, I may just have to do that and get in there with it, especially because not only that, I really want to read more about the Spacing Guild and the Guild Navigators.
Yes,
they pop up in the first book.
Mm-hmm.
I remember enough from the beginning of Dune Messiah to know that they play an integral role at the beginning of the book, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But they're really fascinating to me. And I'm really curious to see what the movie does with them, because the original movie, it was interesting how they did the Guild Navigators. So I don't know.
Yeah,
that's one of those things that was like heavy-handed, over your head, but at the same time, when they first went to Dune, Paul was like, "Oh, I hope I see a guild officer or whatever," and his father was like, "Oh, you won't see one because we've got to be confined, and they're very secretive as they are lucrative or whatever." and the fact that
Yeah.
they hold all this power over everyone due to their space travel, but at the same time, they're so mysterious.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to bite my tongue and kind of moving into the final quarter here. What do you guys, Chaz talked a little bit about it, but like, what would you like to see more of in the series upcoming, and just kind of like overall speculation on what's to come moving forward? What are your guys' thoughts? And I will not ruin anything, I promise.
So I guess towards the end, like I was saying, the beginning insert before the chapter starts, it mentioned a different tagline or name, and I assume that's his sister. So I figure the second book is primarily about the sister's arc, with Paul still being a main character for the Fremen. And I see them being able to make advances with the whole terraforming of the world. But now that we've got his wife, who is the knife, in my opinion, which is going to be the feint within feints within feints. Paul's going to be like, boom, you're in your place. And then she's going to be like, oh, but I didn't know. And a bunch of backstabbing potential. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. What like
more worm action?
Yeah, more worm action. I was about to say, like, book one does a good job with world building, but the overall lore, it just scratches the surface of like Chaz talked a little bit about wanting to know more about the guild. Are there other areas you would like to see more of?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens with Paul going forward. And I kind of know a little bit, only because the Sci-Fi Network did a mini series of both of the next two books.
Oh,
so
okay.
I know what happens, but I'm really interested to see the way the book handles what Paul's power that he's come into does to him over time. So I'm really interesting to see how his character grows and evolves or devolves, and what all happens there.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the ultimate power.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorites. Definitely think you guys should continue the series. We could probably easily fill a couple hours just geeking out on this book, and maybe we'll come back and revisit it after the movie comes out, and geek out on those as well. Tentatively going to work this series into our rotation. So we'll see if we get back to it next month. But yeah. It's been a pleasure. If you haven't already, guys, check out Books and Stuff with Chaz. I'll make sure to get his links and stuff down below, and the cards. And then next Sunday, we're already on 40 total streams. I'll let you take the mic, Pete. Lit RPG is your fun house.
So this is Dungeon Lord Otherworldly Powers by Hugo Huesca. And I really enjoy the series. There's currently 4 out for it. It's a dark fantasy. So it's a dark fantasy lit RPG trapped in another world, becoming a dungeon lord. Second one in the series. So you've got time to read them. They're medium-sized books, not too long. Yeah, I'm excited for it. That is next Sunday.
Yes, probably going to be our normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're still kind of playing with it, about switching up the times. Not sure. Would love for you guys to join us on the Discord, where we geek out 24/7. Also playing with the idea of maybe doing a community pick in our rotation, Peter and I have very selfishly been picking the books that we really want to talk about, but if there is a community pick,
I think a lot of it had to do with just the base. Like we had to build a foundation, and these are things that we enjoy. But man, I love dissecting anything. It's a passion of mine is taking or breaking things, taking it apart, and then fixing it. So
yes,
for taking books apart, and I kind of sit in my little corner, and I have things I enjoy, but I'm curious to see what other people enjoy and why. So
yeah.
and then me and Carl typically line up on viewpoints for 95% of it. So having, Chaz in here and other viewpoints for the abstract or the critical thinking really helps. So
yeah,
always up for suggestions.
We are always up for suggestions. We enjoy the constructive criticism and the challenges to our thoughts and our beliefs. And, when it's all said and done, we hope that you consider us a friend as you take our life water for the greater of the tribe. So, yeah.
Audiobooks, please.
Audiobooks, please. Yes. Awesome. Thanks everybody who joined us live, and appreciate you guys.
Or Chaz, you got anything going on you would like to announce?
No, not really. I don't have anything big coming up. I am getting close to finishing the last book in the Millennium Trilogy by Stieg Larsson. It's the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. So I'm gonna have a Why You Should Read video coming up for that once I've finished it, and I'm going to be reviewing the Kindle Paperwhite here in a very probably my next video actually, because I just got that with my points from work, so I'm pretty excited about that. And so yeah, just little stuff, except for I will be doing that. Why You Should Read the Millennium Trilogy. So
very cool.
Nothing huge coming up. But stay tuned. I have a new video every Friday. So this week was different because I had 3 videos pretty much back to back.
Good problem to have. Problem to have.
Yeah.
Good looking out, Pete. Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching, and we hope to geek out with you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.